Dungeons and Dragons, Forgotten Realms, Night of the Hunter, Companions Codex 1, by R.A. Salvatore. Somewhere in chapter 19. Regis grimaced in revulsion as he watched as Puent bit out the throat of a hobgoblin. The dwarf glanced up at him, smiled weirdly, and tossed the convulsing monster aside with ease. With such ease, Puent had hardly swung his arm out, it seemed, and just that one arm, yet the hobgoblin, thick and heavy, flew across the corridor to crunch into the wall with bone-shattering impact. Well met, thimble dwarf Puent, Regis announced as enthusiastically as he could manage, past the hump of fear welling in his throat. You little rat thief, the dwarf muttered, stalking forwardly, slowly, casually, even. Puent, it's me, Regis cried. Don't you know me? Oh, I knowin' ye, the dwarf said, but Regis got the feeling that the dwarf was not specifically referring to Regis, who was, of course, long dead in Puent's thoughts. The vampire walked forward. Regis lifted his rapier. Puent, he cried, it's me, Regis. He almost finished stating his name when the undead dwarf rushed up suddenly, so suddenly, seeming almost to warp step himself, much as the specter of Ebon's soul had done. Regis cried out and dived aside, and still got clipped by a swinging arm and sent tumbling. As he fell aside, Regis reached back with his dark hand to fend the dwarf away, but the dwarf's spiked gauntlet dug a line across the back of that hand, and the halfling reacted with a yelp. He pulled himself to his knees and wheeled back as quickly as he could, turning some semblance of a defense posture as the closing Puent, though what he might do against one so powerful and heavily armored as this, he did not know. Puent leaped at him, fangs bared, fists punching in front out wide, and Regis cried out, thinking himself surely doomed. But Puent never got there, intercepted in mid-leap by a spinning warhammer that drove him aside and sent him staggering back down the corridor. He turned immediately, though, his hateful gaze focused squarely on Regis, and with a feral growl that froze the marrow in Regis' bones, he charged. The halfling yelped again and flung his remaining snake at the vampire. The living garrote did its magic, racing up and around the dwarf's neck, and the sneering undead specter's face appeared over Puent's shoulder, tugging hard. But the vampire didn't draw breath. The vampire didn't even seem to notice. Again, the halfling was saved by a missile, this time a living one, as Wolfgar leaped past Regis to crash heavily into Puent. The dwarf tried to hit him with a left hook, but Wolfgar caught him by the arm, then grabbed Puent's right arm as well, holding and twisting. The two powerful combatants locked and strained. At first, Puent with the lower center seemed to gain the upper hand, with Wolfgar sliding backward under the dwarf's ferocious press. Wolfgar growled his god's name and drove on with renewed strength, halting the momentum. Quint twisted to the side, and Wolfgar had to turn with him, struggling to hang on as the dwarf tried to pull away. But when Wolfgar leaped the same way as the pull and Quint overbalanced, Wolfgar let go the dwarf's left arm and chopped it short across into the dwarf's face, but then grabbed back quickly before the dwarf could counter with a left. Regis wanted to cheer that strike, but like the garrote tugging around his neck, Quint didn't seem the least bit hurt or stunned or slowed. And it was Wolfgar showing the cost of their struggle. Regis saw for the barbarian's hands drip blood, his flesh tearing against the dwarf's rigid arm plates. Quint ducked his head, dipping his helmet spike, and bore forward, and Wolfgar barely avoided getting stabbed in the face. Then he too bowed forward, tucking his head against the dwarf's helmet to maintain the clinch. Don't that sound like a struggle? That sounds similar to a lot of struggles. It may not be with a vampire with enormous strength, but it may be with your own mind, your own disbeliefs, your own ego. What you need is a wake-up call.